$1 trillion. Yes, 1 trillion with a T. That's how much the infrastructure bill passed last November is promising to deliver to America's infrastructure. In case you haven't heard yet, this bipartisan infrastructure law is supposed to rebuild America's roads, bridges, and rails, expand public transit systems, provide access to clean drinking water, high-speed internet, and tackle the climate crisis. It's even supposed to advance environmental justice, whatever that means. It is also said that it will invest in communities that have been left behind, as well as improve airports and strengthen supply chains. This bill will mark the first time in decades that the United States has invested more into infrastructure than China. Man, this is some bold talk from Washington. Now, many people have heard about this bill, but not many know exactly what it's going to do. On this video, we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite states, the state that probably did the most to help grow my channel early on and continues to be a strong source of viewership, Florida. So on this video, I'm going to break down the numbers that this law has allocated to Florida infrastructure, with the primary focus on the roads and highways. We'll also take a look at some of the reactions to the law from Florida politicians, transportation agencies, and other important people in the state. And finally, as someone who's thoroughly traveled Florida cities and highways, I'll give you my thoughts on where or what highways Florida should consider putting some of these funds. Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy the content as we take a trip to Florida. First, let's take a look at where Florida's infrastructure currently stands. For that, we'll go to the American Society of Civil Engineers, or ASCE. Every 4 years, the ASCE grades the infrastructure of America with a report card format, with A being the best and F being the worst. It covers various areas such as aviation, bridges, ports, roads, schools, and drinking water. Most recently in 2021, Florida received an overall grade of C for its infrastructure, with high scores in areas like bridges, ports, and solid waste, while areas needing the most improvement were dams, schools, and levees. The general sentiment of this report was that most of Florida's planned projects focus on repairing and maintaining existing infrastructure, with little investment into long-term projects, specifically addressing the issue of sea level rise in the state. Florida's C rating is considered mediocre by the ASCE, but is slightly better than the nation as a whole, which earned a C-. One thing of note about Florida is its explosive population growth. Since 1990, the state has moved from just under 13 million people to 21.5 million in 2020, supplanting New York as the nation's third most populated state, with no signs of slowing down anytime soon. Outside of the growth of California in the mid-20th century, I'm not sure that we've ever seen anything like it before. Typically, infrastructure struggles to keep up with population growth, with most projects being reactive rather than proactive, and taking longer to build than developers can plop down new housing and subdivisions. A project planned to deal with an issue today can easily be immediately overwhelmed by the time it is finally completed 10 years later when you have this kind of growth. Generally speaking, Florida has done a pretty decent job considering this staggering growth. Now let's talk about the most important part, the money. With the funding formula from Washington, over the next 5 years, Florida is slated to receive $13.3 billion for highways and bridges, $2.8 billion for public transportation, $198 million to expand EV charging networks, $1.2 billion for airports, $100 million to expand broadband internet, $1.6 billion for water infrastructure, $26 million to protect against wildfires, $29 million to protect against cyber attacks, and Florida could receive a portion of $3.5 billion allocated to weatherization, which is to be spread among multiple states. Overall, Florida is expected to receive around $20.1 billion of the $425 billion allocated to individual states. There are also various federal grant programs that Florida can compete with other states for, but since none of that funding is guaranteed, we'll focus on what Florida is getting for certain. FloridaTaxWatch.org estimates that if Florida's share of infrastructure funds were equal to its population share, that the state would receive an additional $8.6 billion. TaxWatch also stated, when Florida does not get its fair share of federal assistance, our tax money goes to subsidize programs in other states. That is exactly what has been happening in Florida for many, many years. For comparison, here are the allocations for the other top 5 population states in the U.S. California, population 39.5 million. Formula funding, $46.9 billion. Texas, population 29.1 million. Funding, $37.3 billion. Florida, 21.5 million, $20.1 billion. New York, 20.2 million, receiving $29.1 billion. And Pennsylvania at $13 million will be receiving $17.8 billion. The reactions by Florida officials have been interesting. Let's start at the top with wildly popular Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who will play a key role in deciding exactly how these funds will be spent in Florida. Governor DeSantis' major criticism of the law appears to be centered around the amount. The governor expressed concern over Florida's share of the funds relative to its population. Is Florida being treated well by this? Or is Congress basically funneling money to a bunch of very high tax and dysfunctional states, said the governor. I think it was a lot of pork barrel spending for what I could tell. Florida Senator Rick Scott stated, the first thing they said, it was paid for. A complete lie all the way through, Scott said. It was never paid for. We should not be borrowing more money. We should live within our means. And we should spend the money where we get a return. Scott took issue with taxpayer dollars paying for what he says the private sector should pay for. The official statement from Senator Marco Rubio reads, I support investing in roads, bridges, broadband, and efforts to mitigate against sea level rise. And I hope there will be a bill I could vote for, Rubio said. But this bill was negotiated in secret, rushed through the process without meaningful opportunities to have input, and adds a net increase of $350 billion to the national debt. I can't vote for a bill like that. In the House, U.S. Representative Stephanie Murphy stated, the bipartisan infrastructure bill will dramatically improve quality of life in Florida by providing residents with better roads and bridges, modern air and seaports, high-speed broadband, and clean water. I've been fighting for this historic legislation since it passed the Senate in August, and I'm thrilled we are finally sending it to the president's desk to be signed into law. U.S. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz said, Florida's tourism economy relies on a strong, modern travel network, and Democrats sent bold, job-producing legislation to President Biden that will repair our dilapidated water systems and fix our crumbling roads and bridges. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act will do all that by putting thousands of Floridians to work with union and good-paying jobs. And U.S. Representative Val Demings, today's vote was about jobs and America's future. When we invest in middle-class America, when we invest in the people who have to go to work every day, America does better. Our communities need this funding now. Democratic and Republican mayors who are clear-eyed know that investing in our supply chain infrastructure can't wait. Jobs can't wait. Repairs can't wait. Fighting climate change can't wait. And protecting our health and safety can't wait. All right. And U.S. Representative Brian Mast. Tonight's vote was just the start of Democrats' attempts to jam through a multi-trillion-dollar socialist wish list with the largest tax increase in decades to pay for it. Their reckless spending habit has already caused massive inflation and labor shortages, and I will do everything in my power to stop them from continuing down the path towards socialism. So basically in Florida, things can be summed up as donkeys yay, elephants nay. On the non-political side, things are a little more varied. Jax Today spoke with Florida climate scientist Jayantha Obesekera, probably screwed up his name, but he is the director of the Sea Level Solutions Center at Florida International University, who said, frankly, all this funding is probably not adequate. When you look at holistically what is needed, even in infrastructure, it might not be adequate. But I think it's a great first step. Lafayette resident Vicky Clement spoke to WCJB about a recent $6.5 million announcement by Governor DeSantis for improvements to services in the county. She said, it feels great. We need it so bad because sometimes we have to drive down the middle of the lanes to not bounce around so much because the roads are in such bad condition. Florida Commissioner of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Nikki Freed, seems to be thrilled about the bill. She wrote, our roads and bridges are the backbone of our daily lives. Yet more than 400 bridges and 3,500 miles of Florida's highways are in poor condition, causing safety concerns, longer commutes, and extra costs to drivers. I may be Florida's only statewide elected official thanking President Biden for this investment. But nothing about this bill is partisan. After decades of stagnation, investing in Florida's infrastructure is the road forward for our communities, our economy, and our future. Alright, so that's that for the Florida reactions. At the end of the day, regardless of how anyone feels, the law has been passed. So let's talk about the future. Where should Florida spend these funds? I'll give my opinion, but if you're from Florida or spent time there, I'd like to know what you think in the comments as well. When it comes to roads and highways, personally I think Florida does a pretty good job for the most part, especially compared to some of the states I've been traveling around recently. New York, Pennsylvania, don't get me started. Whew. Here we have a map of Florida's major interstate highways and their spurs along with the Florida Turnpike. The first thing that comes to mind for me is I-4, specifically from Orlando to Tampa. I did a video a while back on I-4 and what Florida plans for in the future. The recently completed I-4 Ultimate Plan brought great relief to the Orlando area, but several billions are needed to complete the Beyond Ultimate past Champions Gate and through the Disney area. I think this would be a good place to fast track funding, as Tampa and Orlando are two very large and very fast growing metro areas with only this puny subpar highway connecting them. Florida DOT has a plan in the works to address I-4 in Tampa itself. If you live in Tampa or have been through there, then you already know how much of a pain that interchange with I-275 can be. Being that there really aren't any good alternatives to I-4 between Orlando and Tampa, fixing this highway should be at the very top of Florida's list. I-95, Florida's main highway running along the East Coast, I didn't think it was too bad for the most part. Traffic flowed pretty well through Jacksonville and down the majority of the Atlantic coast. When you get closer to Miami, things did get interesting. In Miami, I think Florida should invest in a better way to separate the hot lanes from general purpose lanes. I saw way too many people diving in and out of the lanes when I was there, and sometimes it caused some serious crashes, even deadly at times. I'm not sure if the right-of-way is available, but if possible, a similar style to I-4 in Orlando should be utilized here. I-75 flowed pretty well through most of the state, so I think they're good here. Though with the rise of Ocala, I-75 might be one to keep an eye on in the future. While I-275 in Tampa was typically backed up in the vicinity of the I-4 interchange and much of Pinellas County. I-10 in Jacksonville is currently being rebuilt at I-95 and is a pretty smooth, albeit boring, ride through the rest of the state. While there have been some rumblings of an extension of Florida's turnpike to the north, I don't believe this is necessary. This is a case where I think it would be better to let the wetlands be and not build. If more capacity is needed in this region due to the growth of Ocala and Tampa, I'd say it's more feasible to expand I-75 than to build a new roadway through northwest Florida. Lastly, let's take a look at some of the top projects that Florida DOT already has in the works. Their website is conveniently broken down by region, so we'll examine the top projects in each region. We'll start right at the top. Northeast Florida is first up. This is the Jacksonville area, another fast-growing part of the state. Other than the Panhandle, it seems like all of Florida is growing like crazy. Florida DOT has one of the better DOT websites and makes finding information pretty easy. It looks like the major future project in this area is I-95 in Jacksonville. Florida DOT says that no major work has occurred on I-95 since 1999, when Jacksonville had a population of around 1.1 million. The area has since added over 500,000 people. This project is needed to address existing and future congestion, improve regional mobility for delivery of goods and services, decrease emergency and hurricane clearance times, and to improve overall safety of the I-95 corridor and Myrtle Avenue Bridge, says Florida DOT. There's a nice illustration here showing the projected population growth of Duval County alone into 2045. The biggest project for Northeast Florida, however, is the new St. Johns River Bridge. This bridge is the final segment of the First Coast Expressway and is projected to be completed at a cost of $334 million by 2029. I'd suggest directing funds to this project if possible to speed things up a bit, as the First Coast Expressway will take significant pressure off of Jacksonville's existing roadway network. Now on to Northwest Florida, aka the Florida Panhandle. I don't see any huge projects slated here in Northwest Florida. It appears to be mostly improvement in smaller spots along major highways like Interstate 10 and US 90. This isn't surprising, as the Panhandle is growing, but not growing like the rest of the state. I found traveling around the Panhandle to be much easier than the larger cities to the south. FloridaNorthwest.com even boasts about the impressive rail, road, and seaports of Northwest Florida, so it must not be too bad up here. If you live in the area, let me know what you think. Now on to Central Florida. Here is one of the parts of Florida experienced the most growth. Centered around the Orlando area, Orange County alone has more than doubled in population since 1990. I already spoke about I-4 earlier in the video, so let's see what else Florida has cooking up for Central Florida. In Central Florida, the name of the game with the highways is tolls. I like to call Orlando Toll City, as all of its highways are toll roads other than I-4. Being from North Carolina, I wasn't used to tolls, but visiting Orlando specifically made me bite the bullet and purchase a Sun Pass just to get around the area. An interesting study here is the proposal to widen US 1792 southwest of Kissimmee. This could be useful in helping alleviate traffic on I-4. As mentioned before, one of the reasons that I-4 is so bad is that it is one of the few interstates without an accompanying US route for those not wanting to use the freeway. Getting the roadway widened to 4 lanes out to Tampa could be a move here. Outside of I-4, most major projects in the area appear to be already funded. I do see a few projects proposing widening and improving Florida 50 east of Orlando, heading to the coast. This appears to be a good proactive measure with the amount of development occurring in that direction. Up next, we have West Central Florida, aka Tampa Bay. In Tampa Bay, the main highways are I-4, I-75, and I-275. We already know about I-4, but also of note is I-275 in Pinellas County. Growing even faster than Orlando, Pinellas highways have quickly been overwhelmed by the sudden influx of Americans flocking to Florida. For I-275, it looks like Florida is proposing an I-4 Ultimate-like solution. I-275 in St. Petersburg is to be widened with 2 tolled express lanes. I'd probably suggest funding for the Tampa Bay area be directed here, as I-75 has no major unfunded projects in the pipeline for now. In Southeast Florida, which includes Broward and Palm Beach counties, as well as the Treasure Coast, the primary route through this area is I-95. Let's see what's in the works. The most interesting project in this area is in Broward County. If you're familiar with the area, then you know that the Sawgrass Expressway ends at Southwest 10th Street and becomes a messy, dangerous arterial shortly before reaching I-95. This was a council portion of the original planned highway in the 1970s that would have connected it to Interstate 95. Florida DOT has developed a unique plan here that will utilize what they call connector lanes, which will run directly to I-95 without accessing properties along the road. Also along the route, a Southwest 10th Street local route will run along the outside to provide access to those properties. There doesn't seem to be any document showing the design of this proposal. If you know of a resource where it can be found, let me know in the comments. Anticipated start dates are 2024 and 2025 for the two parts, but no further info on design or funding are provided. So for Southeast Florida, this looks like a good project to direct some funding if needed. The next area listed is Southwest Florida, centered around Lee, Collier, and Charlotte counties, containing the cities of Fort Myers, Naples, and Cape Coral. By now, you've all heard about the devastation Hurricane Ian inflicted upon this area recently. Several roadways have been washed out, bridges destroyed, and basic infrastructure in shambles. The federal government provides separate funding for disaster recovery, so I won't be talking about the infrastructure that requires replacement or repair due to the storm. Instead, we'll be looking at planned future projects for the area in general. The sole major highway and lifeline for this area is Interstate 75. For the majority of the current route, it is at least 6 lanes and bypasses the downtowns of the major cities. Most of the current projects along I-75 appear to be various interchange redesigns. Specifically, several divergent diamond interchanges will be coming to the Southwest Florida area. These look like they're either already funded for construction or currently under construction. But for Southwest Florida, the big project looks like it will be managed lanes, aka toll lanes, on I-75. You gotta love how the state DOTs came up with the term managed lanes to soften the blow of the word toll. If Southwest Florida is to get funds for new construction, this is likely the place where it will be spent. And last but certainly not least is South Florida, everyone's favorite, the MIA. This area also includes Monroe County, which covers the Florida Keys and Key West. Being that this is the most populated region of Florida, there are numerous projects in the works. From what I could find, the biggest project down here appears to be a major reconstruction of the current interchange of I-95, I-395, and State Route 836 near downtown Miami. This project is expected to bring a new signature bridge to the downtown Miami skyline, with a very high vertical clearance that will open up over 30 acres of communal space in the impoverished Overtown neighborhood. A portion of State Route 836 will also be double-decked over the Miami River. Renderings of the new design can be seen here at i395miami.com. The total cost is projected at $840 million with a to-be-determined start date. Looks like this is the place for money that is coming to the Miami area. Alright guys, that wraps up the infrastructure bill and what it means for Florida's highways. Do you think Florida got its fair share? Is there a project you didn't see that you believe needs to be funded? Where do you think Florida should invest these funds? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all the supportive comments, emails, and IG messages as well. I will see you on the next trip coming soon to a town near you.